in the statute, the doctor looks to the 5th edition of the Guide to Evaluation of Impairments and gives an impairment rating. Doesn't mean every case gets one. Sometimes it's 0%, and we have to get another doctor to analyze it if we think it's incorrect.
Absolutely.
But they're given a rating, a percentage. Let's say they had a shoulder surgery, and just for math, maybe it's easier to say 10%, even though surgery likely would be higher, like 15 to 20 percent. They're given a percentage, kind of explain how the statute works when they're given, my example, the upper extremity is 10%. How would that work?
Right. So when they're given a rating, we have that percentage, and then there's a chart in the statute that corresponds with the particular body part injured and the maximum amount of weeks that they would be entitled to benefits if it was 100% disability. We don't see that. We see 10%. We see things on the lower end, largely because if somebody still has function in that extremity, in that body part, then it would only be partially impaired. So there's a calculation that we do is we take the maximum amount of weeks, we multiply it by the percentage of impairment, and that gives us the amount of weeks that the injured worker would be entitled to benefits at that compensation rate. So the same rate that they would have been getting these income benefit checks. And then that we can multiply by the compensation rate and get a dollar amount on what that percentage of impairment would be.
Yeah. So my example was 10% to the shoulder, which is 225 weeks. So it's 22.5 weeks.
Right.
Times the weekly check amount.
Exactly.
Again, these 2 of the 3 buckets dealing with weekly checks and impairment benefits, the amount of your check is very significant. I think it's completely unfair and unjust in the system, honestly, that third benefit based on permanency of an injury is tied to how much you make.
Right.
I remember having the nicest lady, had 2 back surgeries. Her comp rate was less than $100. And I had to tell her, she's crying in my office. I'm having to tell her this one bucket for the permanency of your injury for 2 back surgeries to your spine is you're going to recover $7,000.
Yeah.
And she's crying in my office, and it's I can't control what the statute does.
Exactly.
I think it's unfair because you make $725 a week in weekly checks versus someone who makes $100 a week with the same injuries.
Yep.
She's got to deal with that for life, be in pain, medications, have challenges. I'm sure she's going to aggravate it. And I got to tell hers is $7,000 while this person is, 7 times that or whatever it is. So it's not a fan of that part of the statute, but it is how it reads. And so one thing is really important too is you want to make sure if you're a lawyer, understand those guides to evaluation of impairments. Don't just trust what the doctors are saying. A lot of doctors will send a physical therapist to do an FC or functional capacity evaluation with an impairment, but don't always just trust that that's correct and that's accurate. Understand, you should have familiarity because we see these back injuries all the time.
Absolutely.
How much a single level fusion should be, a 2-level fusion, a 3-level fusion. Prosthetic, someone has a hip replacement or a shoulder replacement or something in the knee, you kind of know the ranges because through experience you're seeing these things. So if you see something coming in too low, hey, doc, this isn't correct. You can send them the chart, do a conference call like we talked about, increasing value of medicals to say, no, and a lot of times they'll say, you're right. I just gave a number and they won't maybe tell you how they did it, but that hey, this is accurate. But we can do an independent medical exam just on impairment benefits if it's significant enough for the client. Because again, we're talking about boosting the value of the case. There's 3 buckets. There's no pain and suffering. We can't let one of those buckets not be, maximized.